Hey everybody, this is Mr. Sounders. This is week 6. Can you believe it? Week 6. And we are in music class today talking about another family of instruments. Remember, in the orchestra, instruments are divided up into groups according to their similarities, right? And those little groups are called families. Now, so far, 2 weeks ago, we talked about the string family. Last week, we talked about the brass family. And today, you might have guessed it, here I'm holding one. This is the woodwind family. Woodwind. Now, guys, let's talk about the woodwind family in just 1 second, but I want to remind you about the archives, okay? If anything I mention about strings family or the brass family or anything else, you know, kind of makes you interested to go back and see it again, then you can absolutely hit the archives and go back to whatever week we talked about, you know, whatever you want to hear again. And you can look through all those videos, or if you just found something very interesting or something silly and you wanted to see it again and laugh, whatever. It's just kind of cool to be able to use that archives button up there. All right? Now, back to the woodwinds. Guys, there are a lot of woodwind instruments. I'm probably not going to talk about every single one, but I want to give you an idea of the most common woodwind instruments in the orchestra. All right, we'll start. This isn't the highest one. Usually I like to go from high to low, but since I happen to be holding this one, we'll start with this one. I'm not going to play it for you because really I'm not a woodwind guy. I can play Mary Had a Little Lamb on this. No, I'm not going to prove it, but I can. I can play a few songs on this instrument here, and all the woodwinds actually, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to let you hear somebody who is much, much better than I am. Anyway, this instrument here is called a clarinet. You guessed it. Now, you've seen this in one very popular cartoon. If you ever watched SpongeBob, you've seen Squidward with the clarinet. That's what this is. It's a clarinet. But also, I want you to see kind of the size of it, okay? The clarinet makes sound, as all the woodwinds do, except for one, by something vibrating. Now, if you remember back in the brass family, the lips of the person playing were what would make the vibration. Remember, vibration is the beginning of all sound. So the lips in the brass instruments would go like that, right? In the woodwind, I'm taking this off now, if you can see, except for one instrument. I'm going to show you that one, show you that one in a minute. This is called a reed, and it's a very, very thin piece of wood, okay? Very thin. And that is placed right up against the mouthpiece, like that, okay? And then when you blow it, it vibrates, and it makes a squeal like none other. But when it's on the instrument, it makes notes, okay? Now, a good thing to think about to maybe relate to this is if you ever taken a piece of grass, you should try this sometime, and put it right between your thumbs, up and down flat like this. And then you can cup your hands like this, and you put your lips like right here, and you blow. And if you're really lucky, if you get it placed just right, you will hear a squeal, like a really loud squeal. Well, it's vibrating in there. That piece of grass is doing that. You got to find like a nice, fat, flat piece of grass. Not just some little thin blade, but a fat, flat one, okay? Nice big piece of grass, and you can put it in there and hold it between your thumbs and try to do it. Maybe I'll do that for you on a video sometime if I can find a piece of grass outside. Okay, now back to this. That's the same thing that this reed does, okay? When you blow, that reed goes zzz, and it makes the vibration. So you are just blowing like that. You're not actually doing anything with your own lips. Okay, so this is what makes a woodwind instrument part of the woodwind family. Okay, because, you know, you might be tempted to think, oh, woodwind, wait a minute, it's made of wood. And historically, like years ago, they probably were. I mean, many of them were. Okay, a lot of these instruments were originally, like thousands of years ago, made out of wood. But nowadays, I mean, that's definitely, you know, you could have instruments that are made out of plastic, out of fiberglass, out of metal. Okay, and they're all still part of the woodwind family because of the way the sound is made. Okay, because of that reed. Now there's one exception. I happen to have it here in my pocket. Not the whole instrument, but just the mouthpiece part. This mouthpiece goes to the highest member of the highest part member of the woodwinds, called a flute. Now there's a little teeny flute, little teeny one called a piccolo, and that's really the highest. But this, the highest, generally common member of the woodwind family is the flute. Okay. Now this doesn't have a reed on it. If you can see, this actually has just a hole, and this is kind of cool, y'all, because what this does is it vibrates by when you blow across the hole. And when you blow your air across the hole, it splits the air, and it makes the air go down into this tube and vibrate around in the tube. Okay? Now, I can't make any notes because I don't have the rest of the flute on there. The rest of the flute would have all sorts of keys, kind of like this. Okay? And then you cover holes, kind of like you did in a recorder, if you've ever played a recorder. And then that makes the different notes. So this is how a flute sound is made. Now again, the flute, you can see, I don't know if you can see, it's metal. Okay? But it's still a member of the woodwind family. Okay, now let's talk down through the rest of them. All right. If we're going to talk down, I'm going to go ahead and restart real quick, and I'm going to go down all of the instruments in the common ones in the woodwind family, from top to bottom, from high to low, from littlest to biggest. Okay. First of all, you have, and I already showed you the mouthpiece of a flute. So first of all, you have a flute and a piccolo. The piccolo is like the baby flute. Okay, and the piccolo is the highest, but the flute's the next highest. The flute is a beautiful instrument. It can, be really pretty and smooth, but it can also be really flittery, flighty, and fast, which makes like great, awesome trills. They're called trills. Okay, a trill and birdie effects and all sorts of cool stuff. It just makes music exciting, and a lot of movement and motion in really exciting orchestra pieces. Then you have the clarinet. Okay, and you saw that a minute ago, which has a reed. Okay, then you also have an oboe. Oboe looks a whole lot like a clarinet, but it's got a real thin mouthpiece on it. It doesn't have the same kind of wide, mouthpiece that you saw on that clarinet. The oboe has two reeds, and they go like this together, and then you blow, and it makes those two reeds vibrate. Okay, it's called a double reed instrument. That's an oboe. Okay, then the big brother to the oboe is called an English horn, and it's longer, bigger, and remember, longer, bigger means lower sound, right? And so an English horn has a lower sound. It does look like a big, huge oboe, but also the end of it rounds out in kind of a ball shape. It's really cool. It kind of looks like if you had water running through it or air running through it and you stopped up the end and it just started going, right? That's what it looks like at the end. Then, after the English horn, you have a bassoon. And that is a low, big instrument that also has a double reed, okay? And they, it can be a really pretty instrument, but the characteristics of a bassoon also make it really good for sounding kind of comical and maybe like a clown, or maybe goofy, or maybe old. And we'll talk about that another time as well when we get to a really, really awesome piece called Peter and the Wolf. The oboe plays the character of the old grandfather, and we'll talk about that another time. But it's kind of, it just sounds like that. It's perfect for that. In addition to the bassoon, you also have a contrabassoon, which is huge honking thing, and that is just double low. I mean, it's really low. Big, fat, low sound. I left out one right in the middle just because it kind of, it feels different to kids when you hear about this one. The family, it's part of the family of woodwinds, but it's kind of its own little unique family because there's so many of them. There are at least 4, okay, called the saxophone. Okay. Now, the saxophone has an whole family of its own, but it's part of the woodwind family. And you have a soprano saxophone that kind of looks almost like a small gold clarinet. Then you have an alto saxophone, which looks more like what you're used to. It has the curve down there for the saxophone. Then you have the tenor saxophone, the tenor saxophone. And then finally, that's just bigger and lower, remember that. And then finally, you have the baritone saxophone, or the bari sax, which is big and awesome, and it's really low and honk, and it can go, I mean, I'll let you hear it, actually. It's very, very cool. So that's the whole saxophone family, and that is still part of the woodwind because the saxophone mouthpiece, to your eyes, would look just like a clarinet mouthpiece. The reed's usually a little bit bigger, but it looks just like that with a reed, and you put your mouth on it the same way and you blow, and the reed will vibrate and make the buzzing, the squealing, and that makes the notes, that makes the sound for the notes on the saxophone. All right, guys, ran down those quick, but let me name them one more time. Okay, these are now in order of high to low. You've got flute and piccolo. Then you've got clarinet. Then let's go ahead and throw in the saxophones right in there because they go from high to low in their own with their own family anyway. So saxophones, and you got oboe, you got English horn, you got bassoon, contrabassoon. Right? And there is even such a thing, you just don't see it all that often, like a clarinet. There's such a thing as a bass clarinet. And it's a big, long clarinet, huge thing, but it actually has a little scooping end to it, sort of like a saxophone, but like a mini saxophone end to it down there. And that's called a bass clarinet. Pretty cool too. Guys, there's a wide variety in the woodwind family, as you can see. Now down below, you're going to hear some great examples of really good woodwind players. And then as always, I'll show you some really cool stuff down below. All right? Have a great day. Enjoy all this. I hope you have fun and learn something.